Welcome to the Employee Advocacy and Influence podcast. My name is Lewis Gray. I'm a senior marketing manager here at Disseminate. My co host today is Elliot Elsley, who is our head of sales operations, and we're joined today by a very special guest. So, our guest today is Anna Bertoldini. And Anna is the senior social media brand manager at NielsenIQ, and she brings with her a wealth of experience in employer branding, employee advocacy, and specifically, really, for this episode, in personal branding. I've followed Anna on LinkedIn for some time, and I've wanted to talk to her on this podcast for a while. So I'm absolutely thrilled to have you with us today, Anna. So welcome, first and foremost. Would you mind telling us a little bit about you and your role at NIQ?
Sure, and thank you so much. Super happy to be here. So, yes, as you already mentioned, Lewis, thank you. I'm the senior social media brand manager at NielsenIQ, also known as NIQ. And my role is really to amplify our global brand story across social media using large scale social media campaign activations, employee and leadership advocacy, and also a bit of influencer marketing. So that's really what I do, is to make sure that our narrative as a corporation is amplified through our social channels to reach new and existing audiences. And of course, winning our clients' and prospects' hearts and minds.
Amazing. It's super exciting stuff. And yeah, to give listeners, I guess, a little bit of context, the reason we wanted you to join us for this episode, we spoke about this on a previous episode, but we recently released the employee advocacy benchmark report. And one of the standout statistics in that report was that 96% of respondents said that they had seen a positive impact on their career from posting on social media. And the majority of those said it had a significant impact on their career. So naturally, when it came to guests, and again, thinking of experts in personal branding, yeah, Anna, you were by all means the natural guest for this episode. So we're going to talk a little bit about employee advocacy and getting started with employee advocacy, and then we're going to pick Anna's brains on some personal branding topics. So with all of that said, let's get into the episode. So, we'd like to start every episode with a guest with a quick fire round. And these are really just some FAQs that come up in the world of employee advocacy and personal branding. We try to tailor them to every guest. So, Anna, I'm going to put you on the spot here and we'll go through five of these quick fire questions. So, first and foremost, thinking about employee advocacy, what is the most important metric you're looking at for advocacy content performance?
Yeah, so we mainly look at content reach and impressions.
Okay. And what is your main objective with employee advocacy?
To increase our brand authority and visibility, as well as our credibility through the power of our employee voices.
Super interesting. And if you had to choose just one thing, what would you say is the key to employee advocacy program success?
Oh, okay. Well, there are so many keys, but I'd probably say the top key is to keep the momentum going. So engagement.
I love that. And I agree, there are so many things. So, thinking about personal branding now, what's your advice for anyone getting started with personal branding?
Yeah, so I'd say take baby steps, because at the beginning it can be quite intimidating to start sharing your opinions online and to get out there and put your voice out there. So do it little by little. Start small and then work your way up.
Love that. And then, very lastly, thinking of keys again, what is the key to great personal branding?
Yeah, so I'd say consistency. So that's why taking baby steps is so important. Being consistent, having a more or less strategy with what you want to do with your brand, and really sticking to it. That's I think the most important thing.
Amazing. Yeah, it's always great to hear people's answers to these frequently asked questions, and it's interesting always to see I guess, the variation in people's responses. It just goes to show that people prioritize different things, I guess, depending on what your goals are. But if we take a step back, thinking about when you first got started with employee advocacy, how did you kind of come into this space?
Oh yeah. So I mean, for me, employee advocacy has always been a part of my employer branding roles. Prior to my current position within the brand marketing center of excellence, I was an employer brand, going from being an employer brand specialist at BlackRock, working my way up to a manager position, eventually being our global head of employer brand at NielsenIQ for our 40,000 associate base. So employee advocacy has always been a part of my job. It's always been important because to attract the best talent, people need to see that the current employees in the company really believe in the company's mission and values, and that and if they're speaking up, it definitely is a good sign of engagement. So it was always a part of my strategy to not just share great content, to build a relationship with candidates and prospects, but also to strengthen that relationship through the voices of our employees. So really the method was always the same. Leveraging our people, treating them well, and making sure that they had the tools and the encouragement to speak up, but the targets were different, right? It went from candidates to being customers.
That's super interesting. And you mentioned about tools. I was wondering if you have any, I guess within NIQ, but from yourself personally, do you have any training tips or resources that you provide employees to get them started with building their personal brands?
Oh my gosh, yeah, absolutely. So we have so much available now at NIQ, and it took a while to build, but the most important thing was really collaborating with other teams within the company. So I worked together with our social media team to get a social media training course on our learning management system that included a chapter on advocacy, right? And growing your personal brand in a way that is compliant, but also to make sure that people knew what to say, what not to say. And this was always meant to not limit what people would be posting about, because that was never really the point of the course. It was actually just so they knew the limits so that they would feel more encouraged to speak up. So sometimes people don't like to start because they're scared of doing so. They're afraid of saying something wrong. And so by actually providing those guidelines, it doesn't restrict people. It actually pushes people to go forward, because now, okay, now I know what I can say and not say. Here's some do's and don'ts that I can follow. And so that was really the first thing that we did, was launch this course. And then we have an intranet page dedicated to being an employee advocate. And this has that training. We have resource materials. So like we have something we call like a 10 commandments page, but it's really a list of 10 do's and don'ts on how to be a great advocate. We have the benefits of personal branding. We have great examples of employees doing so from all levels, from leaders to entry level positions. We have people doing great personal branding, and so we share those success stories on this page. And then we also have a link to join our community, to be an ambassador and take part in our program. So those are just kind of the trainings and resources and materials that we have. Oh, and we also have social media materials. So we have templates, we have a LinkedIn banner. We have also a little bit of a one pager on how to optimize your LinkedIn profile and make sure it's branded with the company. So those are some of the things that we offer people, not just in the community, but to everyone. And if they want to, they can be a part of the community and get even more tips and tricks on how to grow their brand. Yeah, on Viva Engage.
It's incredibly impressive, and it sounds to me like you're doing everything right. And Elliot, I can see you kind of nodding along with a
Yeah.
smile on your face as Anna's speaking there. I'm assuming you're feeling very much the same.
Yeah, and it's also it's a funny running trend, I guess, from the podcast, but I speak to current clients, I speak to prospects, I speak to all sorts of different people in the space. And the one thing that everyone agrees on when they've run a program or a part of a program is just having an outlet by which people can do this is so, so important. Just demystifying the entire process and saying, hey, these are the do's and don'ts, try and follow this as best as possible. People suddenly understand what they can and cannot do, will start doing it. If you don't have that, people are in the dark, and Anna, as you said, people are just scared, people don't want to get it wrong.
Mhm.
So the easiest thing to do is just not post. And we hear this time and time again. It's such a obvious thing to do, but so many companies are still falling short with these really complicated policies or these uncommunicated policies. Just give people a list. Do this, don't do
Mhm.
this. People will start doing it quite quickly.
Something that's referenced in the report as well. I don't have the exact statistic, but I'm sure Selena, our editor, can pull this one up on screen. But the amount of people who'd responded and said that they don't receive any kind of training was quite alarming, but it was actually much lower than we'd expected it would be. It was around like 32% of respondents, which, considering the fact that we've been kind of pushing this message for a number of years now, and we speak to people who say they aren't really emphasizing training. The amount of people who say that they are now receiving formal training is very much, well, it's very good to see. But obviously, training is just one part. I was curious to know well, how do you ensure that your advocates have a consistent stream of content to share?
Yeah, so that's a great point. One thing I wanted to add on training, by the way, is that we have our own training that we developed actually in-house with our learning and development team. And then we also have, because we have LinkedIn Learning available, a LinkedIn Learning pathway to for people to grow their personal brand. And that also has some courses for like sales and recruiters as well on how to use your personal brand to supercharge your actual job. Because for those two types of ambassadors, personal branding is even more important. um, to make sure that people have a steady stream of content, we actually collaborate. It's all about internal relationships, by the way, with our different marketing teams. We have different regional and regional and product marketing teams that create a lot of content for social media. And so, and I'll talk about the 3-tier system that we have for our advocacy program later. But for our employee advocacy tool group, we actually have a feed in which all of our marketing teams contribute to. We can tag by topic and make sure that people are hitting their goals and resharing. And we have all of our teams contribute to that. We have tool champions that contribute to those, and they want to, because they want to make sure also their content gets visibility. So yeah, so it's really a collaborative effort. I manage the infrastructure of our program, but then for the content itself, we have different teams that contribute content to it. And then for the tier that's like the wider employee community, then I select, handpick content that I think is worth mentioning to them. That's most important, like wider campaigns, mostly global, that warrant a lot more attention. And I post those within our community that's on Viva Engage and Teams, with an inspiration for caption and an asset for them to use, a hashtag, and or if they just want to engage with the post and not actually create one themselves, I send out the link to our corporate channel post and they can just engage with it. So like it, share it, like repost it or comment on it.
That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned about providing captions, and I guess this kind of ties in with training as well. Do
Mhm.
you allow for personalization? Can your advocates tweak the messaging that you provide to make it more their own?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's critical to being to promoting personal branding for employees. Um, I think we only have a few exceptions in which the content is locked, in which we have just a repost option. And that's mostly due to the limitations of our tool, like certain types of assets, like videos, you can only allow for reposts. So that stays pretty much the same. But every other piece of content, we allow people to change the caption and we encourage people to do so because it's a way for not just our content to get visibility, which is why we're posting it, but also for them to grow their brand. Because if they add their own personality, their own tone of voice, maybe something they want to add to that post that they feel strongly about, then they should be able to do so because that's a way for them to grow their audience and for their existing audience to know more about who they are as a professional and as an industry expert.
Yeah, I mean, nothing is more, I guess, beneficial for your personal brand than being your authentic self. And I love to hear that you said it's critical as well, because I know, Elliot, we've spoken about this internally. Trust for you is often one of the big things for employee advocates.
Always. And I think the going back to just the captions as well, it goes back right to the beginning. You said, Anna, baby steps is half the battle, right? We want to start small. So just giving people a caption that they can maybe tweak a few words of and just alter ever so slightly. We actually have it in the Disseminate platform. You can see this across our user base, people that drastically altered a caption versus those that kind of slightly or partially altered a caption versus those that didn't. Now, it's really
Hmm.
obvious the people that edit the caption massively tend to get a lot more engagement because they're writing in their own unique POV. If not, they get slightly less. But a lot of those people that haven't changed the caption probably wouldn't have shared anything without that
Mhm.
caption kind of being made available to them. So it's really good to hear because you cater that to that whole market. Ultimately, we want
Mhm.
everyone, writing their own captions, really kind of diving in from a thought leadership perspective, but
Yeah,
giving people the
absolutely.
opportunity to kind of work it out for themselves is really handy.
Mhm. And to your point, Elliot, like you'd be surprised by the amount of people that simply want to copy and paste the post.
Yeah.
So everyone always talks about you should personalize, make sure your employees can do it. Like that's like the main narrative that I hear on online. But not everyone is willing to personalize, so simply providing a caption idea for them or, like, something that they can copy paste is sometimes enough because maybe the person actually wants to do it but doesn't have time. And so still equipping them with what they need to post something because they want to, is sometimes just, like, enough, right? A lot of times when we
Yeah.
were doing things a lot more manually in the past, um, we would have like a large scale campaign. The two that come to mind were our 100th anniversary campaign of Nielsen IQ. We turned 100 years old um, last year, and also our combination campaign when we combined with another company called GFK. We wanted to make a big splash on social media, and we still had a quite manual employee advocacy program. So we essentially like built out the whole campaign, and we included a section on employee advocacy, providing specific captions for them. And we basically distributed those to our people through our internal communications campaign about it, and people simply copy pasted because that's what they wanted, and then some people didn't. So it's really about giving them options to do it but still allowing people to take part in the campaign in their own way.
Definitely. I see it often, it's a bit like swimming against the current. If you try and ask everybody to immediately personalize a campaign, it's much easier to swim with the current and give everybody stuff and let them kind of veer off in their own directions. Swimming upstream is
Hmm.
harder and more resource intensive is the general trend.
Yeah. Hmm.
I think you're spot on, to be honest with you, Anna. It's about giving them the option, giving them the choice. So I guess you're kind of pleasing both people in that regard. People who want to personalize it. If you don't, here's a prompt. You can take it away, run with that, or you can share that exactly as it is. I had a really interesting conversation last week, actually. Basically with somebody running a employee advocacy program, and they said about the fact that they obviously the main concern is you don't want every employee to share the same thing, but when they were providing their captions, obviously they were encouraging personalization, but they were like, hey, if you don't want to do this, here are a few small things you can do to make it unique to you. So whether that's just adding an emoji in a
Hmm.
certain place, or just adding a paragraph break, or something along those lines. But it's
Hmm.
just kind of, again, holding their hand and
Hmm.
mitigating that risk of everybody sharing the exact same thing.
Hmm.
But I'm curious to know, obviously, a little bit more about, how you're encouraging employees to share and to develop their own personal brands. But I guess before we move on from employee advocacy, I was curious to know, within Nielsen IQ, how do you define ROI, and what objectives are you working towards currently?
Yeah, I mean, we're lucky enough that we have the budget for a tool that we actually inherited because it was owned previously by the company that we combined with. So we sort of, it was like passed on to us in a way, and it has limited seats. We have about 300 seats on this tool, and luckily the tool allows us to get real insights on on the basically ROI of employee advocacy, at least from a marketing perspective. So stuff that we look at are, like I said, reach and impressions on our post. And oh my gosh, a really cool result that we got was that essentially posts that were shared by our employees got between 3 times and 10 times the amount of visibility of our corporate page posts. So that was like really insane, and that was for a really big campaign that we ran quite recently. The other things that we look at are, for example, potential ad value, potential reach of this whole employee network, and it's quite large. So those are some of the things that we look at to um, like justify, I guess, the cost of this tool, but also the effort that we put into our employee advocacy program, all the marketing teams that take part in contributing content to it. So mainly though for us it's reach and visibility because it's really for brand awareness. That's our main goal here with our tool.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I mean, the fact you mentioned, obviously, it's from a marketing perspective, it kind of highlights the fact that the definition of ROI can vary depending on what your objectives are. I know
Mhm.
obviously you're coming from an employer branding background as well. Is that something that you've seen in the past? Is kind of the measurement of the impact switching slightly?
Yeah. So in the past, we would look more at like website, career site traffic from LinkedIn, for example, and social media in general, number of applications coming from that traffic. We'd look at also application starts in general. Those are some of the metrics that we looked at. Also, number of relevant applications per hire, and we saw those numbers change with the addition of employee advocacy. We started off in when I was leading employer branding 2 years ago. Our first step towards employee advocacy was actually just to share videos of our employees talking about their work, talking about their day to day and what they love most about Nielsen IQ, and then it would have a unique link in the post and show we would be able to see who would click on it and what they would do once they were in our career website. So a lot of it was like traffic and applications from those. And then we slowly started to, delve more into the world of employee advocacy and having a more structured program. The program was actually owned by our social media team that we had that, and then I was like brought into it, and so I then started to collaborate on it and eventually own it now. So it was a team effort at the beginning, but these are just some of the ways that we sort of measured the efficacy of sharing our employee stories and really empowering our employees to speak up.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, the fact that you said about the fact that, you noticed the I guess the traffic, but uh the impact from LinkedIn go up after you'd
Hmm.
launched an employee advocacy program. Sometimes you can't directly attribute it, but there's
Hmm.
usually correlation between one of those metrics going up and when you launch the program. It's like you're making more noise on LinkedIn. I mean, if
Yeah.
you ever wanted to guess, or if anybody were to ever doubt it, it's like, okay, well, let's switch it off and see what
Yeah.
happens. And I'm sure you would
Right.
see a steady decline.
Hmm.
But Elliot,
Hmm.
I'm curious to know from your side, does that kind of align with what you've heard from clients in the past?
Yeah, on the employer brand side, I think it's so important. There's two kind of schools of thinking I typically see from an analytics standpoint and how you're kind of measuring all of this. And there's the visibility, the sentiment, the thought leadership, which, at a business like Nielsen, that's a really big part of this. We want to be experts in the industry. We really want to highlight that. We just want to build trust with the audience. And you can measure that in so many ways, but ultimately a lot of it's sentiment based as well. You want to be able to look, do we have more reach? Do we have more visibility? Are people commenting on our posts more often? What's the sentiment of those? Those are really useful metrics to understand. The ROI and the nitty gritty, where we're talking about how many applicants did we get? Where did those applicants come from? That's also really, really cool to be able to track. And in my experience, where I've spent a lot of time as well when I'm really talking about analytics, is okay, web traffic. How much web traffic are we generating? And I think so many people forget, getting people to your website is one thing, but if you get them there and they land on a web page, maybe they fill out a form, whatever it is, you've got retargeting ads, you've got all of these different ways that you can reach back out to that person. So sometimes people look at it as we got one website visit, but actually you got one prospective buyer effectively, depending on
Hmm.
the business you are, that you can now retarget and you can do all of these things. There's so many kind of knock-on benefits to just getting people kind of active on social, sharing stuff, and people landing on your website. So I mean, there's a million ways to track all of this, but that web traffic, that UTM tracking, understanding that this is coming from employees sharing content, so useful to be able to kind of backtrack into as well.
Hmm. Absolutely. And it's so true. It goes for employer brand and it also goes for brand marketing, in which you lead people to a landing page to learn more about something or fill out a form, and you're able to really track how much traffic you're getting to that page with the addition of advocacy, but also kind of, break that down and say, okay, like of that social, like how much of that traffic is actually coming from social and specifically from LinkedIn. No, it's really cool, like how much visibility you can get with advocacy, with this sort of effort that, takes a lot of investment at the beginning, but then it's absolutely worth it.
Definitely. Some of our, I won't say best clients because that might be unfair to some of the other clients, but some of my favorite clients I'm going to go with, um, they tend to really benchmark all of these things against one another as well. So they'll break out organic social, paid social, and then they'll break out employee advocacy as a separate pillar to really kind of benchmark against. That's a
Hmm.
really naturally something like paid. You can generate a huge amount of traffic with paid. That's kind of the
Hmm.
point in it. But when you look at the costs and things like that and really start to weigh the value, some
Hmm.
of our clients have found some really interesting insights. Their paid budgets have massively reduced and their advocacy efforts massively increased because the value's there for them essentially.
Yeah, there was a very interesting example of a case study that we produced with Mercury Herbal, where they basically launched a rebrand campaign and they had a lot of work behind it, which was ultimately switched off because the employee advocacy program had outperformed to such an extent over the first couple of months. So they were just like, "Hey, we don't need to put any more budget behind this. Like this is doing it for us. This is generating the awareness that we needed." But Anna, I wanted to touch on something that you said a moment ago about the fact that it takes a lot of investment at the beginning, and obviously,
Hmm.
like with any new initiative, it's laying the foundations for success. And we've heard stories in the past of companies that have kind of stagnated with their programs, or maybe performance has just dropped off. And a big part of that is just making sure that your program is set up for the long term. So I'm curious to
Hmm.
know, how is your advocacy program set up?
Yeah, absolutely. So our advocacy program is interesting because we have, I call them three tiers to our program. The first tier is, let's say, the all employee advocacy community. So when we launched our social media training course, we also launched our official community. We already had an ambassador group when we launched this. So our social media team had selected like 100 top voices that they saw were super active on LinkedIn, and they created a little Teams channel. But we wanted to expand this and build upon it. So we built upon the great work that they already did. And when we launched this training, we also launched our ambassador community, and we launched basically a Microsoft form in which people could register their interest to be a part of the community if they took our social media training. So once you complete that, you can be a part of our community, because we wanted to make sure that they would, you know, be aware and, had the necessary training. And we also linked to all of our resources, but we opened up the community to all employees, and that's tier one. Everyone was added to our Viva Engage community and the Teams channel, and that's where we post our updates. We have a monthly tip every month on growing your personal brand, whether it be like profile related or content creation. We also had some Q&A sessions. And then tier two is our employee advocacy tool. So for this, we have 300 seats. It's limited. So we reserve those seats to mainly commercial professionals, so sales, account managers, because they would be pushing more commercial content, and of course, it would help their job. So we reserved about half of those seats to commercial teams, broken down into regions, but also into business verticals. And then the other half we reserved for influential voices. So those people who are already super vocal online, who would be keeping that up essentially, which could be leaders as well as non-leaders. Like it was really open to anyone who was already super active on LinkedIn, mainly the people who are in that initial group that I mentioned earlier, the 100 people that the social media team had selected previously. So a lot of those people were invited, plus others. And then we also have a talent acquisition group in there, like a few seats that are dedicated to talent acquisition, because we know the recruiters have really, really big networks, and they also are interested in sharing more commercial content. And by the way, something I shared earlier, Another thing, another reason why I really believe in employee advocacy and pushing content to our employees, both in the community but also in this tool, is because employer brand content by nature is very popular. Whenever you, it's like always our top performing content on social media. Whenever there's a person speaking, a group picture, some sort of event, people go nuts. They love it. They'll like it, they'll share it, they'll comment on it. People get really excited when there's human content, which is by nature how we are. We love human content. We love seeing real pictures of real people. And so employer brand content is not the focus. We need more visibility to our commercial content, which otherwise doesn't get enough love. And so this tool helps us give more visibility to commercial content because we don't need that visibility on employer brand content. We get it a lot already. It's always in the top 10% top performing content out of all of our content categories on social. But with the help of our tool and the community, we also give that type of visibility to really important campaigns and solutions that we're pushing out on social. So that is a big reason why I employ advocacy, is to give love to more and more content that otherwise maybe would not get enough of, because commercial content is a little bit less interesting to some people than the human content. So yeah, going back to tier 2, our tool, this tool, like Disseminate is like, provides all those great analytics. It's a feed so people can select and share what they want. It reports analytics to us so we can see like how people are doing. We have a leaderboard. People also get notified of really important content. They could subscribe to our different topics, all that great stuff. So that's limited to certain people. And every quarter we check our users if they're actually employing the tool or not, because if people start being inactive, we have to first we let them know, are you still interested in keeping your spot on this tool? Because if you're not, we're more than happy to leave it to someone who's going to use it. So they get a few warnings, and then we have to switch out their seats for someone who's going to use them. So it's not like you're on there and you're on there forever. So that's how we keep the engagement going, is like encouraging people to keep sharing. And then the other final tier that we tested is our exec program. So we have a ghostwriting service who's writing content for our top executives to really push leadership advocacy. And it's, like I said, it's a pilot, so it's something we tested and we've seen amazing results. Our I think now it's 4, but it started off with 3 top leaders who are sharing content, saw their visibility increase up to 1,000%. Their audience as well, their followers increased, I want to say up to like 120%, something like that, in like a little over a year. So that's seen amazing results as well. And that's the power of leadership advocacy in getting results too. I'm a true believer in leaders speaking up and representing the brand and the power that it can bring. So that's our, let's say, our final tier of the program. So yeah, this is how we kind of work it. I believe in having different audiences for our program. I don't think every ambassador is equal. I think that everyone deserves a different treatment depending on their position, depending on the type of content they're interested in sharing, or depending on their level and function. So that's why we sort of split it up into three parts.
Yeah, I'm kind of nodding along uncontrollably here because it's all just done to perfection, I would say. I mean, we always say about the fact that you can't treat every employee advocate the same. People have different goals, objectives, they will want different content. And by the way, the reach increase and the follower increase that you've seen on those execs pages, huge. That's absolutely staggering. And that's just since this started, right? Since you started this, I guess, exec pilot.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yes, yeah, exactly. It started in about 2023, so it's been going on for a while, but it's pretty consistent. And the ones who've been really consistent at it, so sharing regular content, saw the best results. So it's something that if it's a play on brand visibility, the results are incredible. And if you want to tweak it, add more like links, or really make it more bottom of the funnel content, you can do that as well, and you can have even more, let's say, revenue focused results. But really, like in terms of visibility, going through execs is reaching the right audiences, and it's showing that people are interested in knowing what they have to say. So yeah, definitely a great pilot.
Amazing. And I guess while we're on the, the benefits that these exec leaders have seen, obviously
Hmm.
you're a shining example of this, but what, in your opinion, are the long-term career benefits of growing your personal brand in this way?
Hmm. Well, I mean, depending on your role, the long-term benefits are, I mean, if you're, let's say you work in sales, so commercial, definitely you'll get more inbound leads, you'll expand your network, you'll get more prospect meetings. And if you're a recruiter, kind of similar, but with candidates, right? More inbound requests, a lot more engagement on your posts, which gives you visibility and will help you recruit better and top talent because people are more willing to listen to you when you have a reputation on a brand. But long term speaking, more generally, what I've seen from my personal experience, but also from the people that I've helped grow their personal brand, it's network expansion. So, really being able to contact and get a response from maybe people you want to add to your network, right? Get those virtual coffee chats that could lead to who knows more opportunities, opportunities in general. So, just speaking engagements, invitation to like podcasts such as this one, also like just invitations to join like groups and events and stuff, but also from a career standpoint, if you're looking for a job, it helps supercharge your job search, because a lot of times recruiters look at candidates LinkedIn profiles to know more about them. You're more easily searchable if you have an optimized LinkedIn profile with the right keywords. So recruiters can find you better. And if you are contacting recruiters or hiring managers, you shine a lot more if you have a good presence online. And then, of course, you become more visible and you get more exposure to leadership, both externally from other companies and internally at your own company. Speaking for myself, since I started consistently sharing content, I want to say I probably supercharged my efforts like a little over 2 years ago, like really sharing on a regular basis between 4 and 5 times a week. I mean, my life has definitely changed. Like, I grew this follower base that I like to call community because to me, it's all about it's like a two-way conversation with my community on LinkedIn. But it led me to get to know a lot of interesting people. I've traveled a lot of Europe and outside of Europe to speak at conferences on employer brand in general, and personal branding and employee advocacy. It's also helped me change my career because last year, when I was ready for a change, a senior leader at my own company, a woman, by the way, very important, noticed my activity on LinkedIn and decided to poach me into her department because she saw that I had specific skills and talent that she was interested in. And that was because I was posting online and really talking about my work and sharing value with my community. And so that was noticed. And so I was able to change careers because of this activity on LinkedIn. And it also helped me land my prior job as the employer brand leader for this company. It just really has changed my life. So I think it's something that everyone should aspire to. You can start off with an employee advocacy program if you don't know where to start. Starting off by sharing your company's content is a great way to safely share content, protecting yourself with with your company's brand because it's content that's approved. It's okay. You can add maybe your thoughts to it or reshare as you'd like, and then slowly work your way to sharing your own content and finding your niche, finding your audience, finding your brand personality and really sticking to that. But I always say, start if you do have an advocacy program within your company, start there, get out, be active, build your confidence, and then eventually you can share a mix of whatever branded stuff, from your organization, but also your own stuff, because you never know who's out there listening, watching, and following your content. You never know who you're inspiring or who you're influencing with your presence.
Yeah, that's really amazing to hear. I think that might be one of the best personal branding stories could be summed up with "It changed my life." I absolutely love that, just as a quote, to be honest with you. Um, so I guess, I mean, thank you first and foremost, for kind of just explaining how you kind of got to this point, and it's fascinating hearing your story. And I don't want to kind of ask you to explain any mistakes here, but I guess from your experience with speaking with others, let's say,
Mhm.
what are some of the most common mistakes people make when attempting to build their personal brands, and how can you avoid them?
Yeah, absolutely. So the top mistakes that I've observed are that people get really excited about personal brand. And so they start and they share content regularly for a period of time and then they slowly lose momentum and stop. Um, it's not like, or they only search for, sorry, they start sharing content when they're looking for a job, when they need something. That is one of the top mistakes is when you start sharing content and start contacting people when you need something, because it's not effective, and also it can feel icky, which is the whole point why people don't like networking, is because sometimes it feels icky. It feels like you're there asking for something, but really the point of networking and personal branding in general is adding value to others. And it's not a form of self promotion or bragging. It's really about adding value to your audience through maybe your experience, what you've learned, the knowledge that you've acquired, and the more you do that, the more you give away, the more you put in, the more you get out. So I would always start your personal brand journey when you're in a comfortable position. So you're not looking to change jobs. You need nothing from no one. You're just really out there saying, hey, like, nice to meet you. You introduce yourself and you offer them some sort of resource. You offer them, your knowledge, your value in some way, and you put in to eventually take out whenever you're going to need that in the future. But the point is never to ask, it's mostly to give.
I couldn't agree more with that. I think that it goes back to what you mentioned about the network expansion as well, where what you're building with so many of these things is just warmth with your network. If just
Hmm.
coming at it from almost a pure sales perspective, you're just warming
Hmm.
all of these people up a little bit more to who you are, which means
Hmm.
when somebody says, actually, yeah, I need an employer branding expert and I need them yesterday, you're top of mind because you're the person that is always posting about it and is always talking about it. And that's
Hmm.
90% of the battle. If you suddenly start posting about it because you need something, as you say, you're not top of
Hmm.
mind for anybody. You're just suddenly somebody that's reaching out that maybe they haven't heard of or they're not really aware of. So yeah, it's so important. Consistency is key with all of this. Just do it slowly, build the brand really, really slowly. People will get to know you. People will start to take the value from it.
Absolutely. And to add to your point, there's something that kicks in after a while. This is especially true if you're looking for a job or you're looking, to get into looking to get into the network of one of your prospects or prospective companies. There's this bias called familiarity bias. I don't know if you both know what this entails, but essentially, if you keep showing up on someone's feed or in someone's line of vision, essentially, by sharing content, by commenting on their posts, by essentially just showing up a lot, people feel like they know you more. And then when you do contact them, they're more likely to answer because they feel like they've seen you already. If you randomly pop up in someone's inbox and they don't know you, they're not likely to answer unless you have a really enticing message. Some people are really good at those hooks. I'm not saying it's impossible, but if you consistently show up on a person's feed or, somehow in their world, they're going to keep seeing your face, your name, and then eventually when you do get to the point where you actually contact them, they're more likely to answer because they've seen you before. And so with a hiring manager, a prospective client, or anyone else that you want to get to know better, if you do show up consistently and then you contact them, it's just a better way to go to heighten your chance of getting a response.
That's amazing, and Anna, I genuinely feel like you're the proof of this because there's so many people that I'd spoken to within the business about this episode and the fact that it was happening, and a couple of people thought they'd spoken with you. It was kind of like, oh, have I spoken with Anna at some point? But it's because anytime we're looking at, maybe the hashtag employee advocacy or personal branding on LinkedIn, there you are. It's I don't know. It's what you said. It's the familiarity bias. It's people obviously feel like they know you to some extent. This was the first time we'd
Mhm.
spoken, and I've followed you on LinkedIn for so long and seen so much of your content. Something I did want to to go back to just on the, I guess, encouraging advocacy, because obviously we've spoken about how consistency is key, but it's also how you communicate this to employees. Often you can talk about the opportunities available to employees, but then it's sometimes a little bit more difficult to communicate this to the execs within an organization because they might feel like they're maybe on the top rung of a career ladder sometimes. And it's like, I don't see this as important. How do you encourage that currently?
Yeah. What I recommend in general, and this kind of goes for employee advocacy, but also any project that you're starting that you need leadership support for, is to connect the potential results of that program to business goals. So if you have a brand visibility issue and you want to drive more revenue, so you need to basically support your commercial goals, tying employee advocacy back to visibility and reach is going to be your way of getting leadership support. It's really about tying everything back to the overall business goals and making sure that leaders know that whatever it is that you're doing, it's supporting those overall goals. So that's how I would, get leadership support, is make sure that you're aware of what the business is looking to do, what's the long-term plan, and how can your project, your program help the business get there. So that's how I would really present this to leadership, depending on what your company goals are, right? Like for us, it's brand authority and visibility. For you, it could be something else.
Yeah, I mean that's again bang on the money, Elliot. Again,
Yeah.
I'm seeing you nodding along. I know this is something that you've dealt with in the past.
Yeah, I guess in 5 years of customer success and launching advocacy programs, this is 90% of the battle, right? It's making sure that people are launching this for the right reasons and not necessarily launching it for the right reasons, actually, but reporting on it in the right direction. Because, as you say, senior leadership care about whatever the objectives are for the business at the time. If that is making more money, then tie it back to ROI and how it's making the business more money. If that is brand authority and visibility, tie it back to that. If it's company culture, that's another one that comes up quite a lot with this. Highlight how many people are engaged, how many people are using this, how many people are involved because of it. There's so many different ways to tie it back. Ultimately for most senior leadership teams, it's revenue and brand visibility. They're the ones that they truly care about. But you completely agree. If there's a stakeholder that is the one that signs this off for you, understand what that stakeholder's objective is, tie it back to that. And it always can be tied back to that, whether that's completely tangibly through web traffic and UTM tracking and all that sort of good stuff, or sort of less tangibly through sentiment and engagement and visibility. There's always a way to do it. It makes such a big difference because it gives you the ability to scale. And I think that's the other big challenge for a lot of people. If you get stuck with, if you're a 40,000 person business and you get stuck with 25 people as your ambassador program and your advocacy program, it's really, really hard to scale past that if you're not providing, hey, these 25 people have done twice
Mm-hmm.
the amount that this social post has done.
Yeah. And don't be afraid to test, right? Pilot stuff and prove the effectiveness of it and how it can tie back to those overall business objectives to then get more investment for it. Like if you can prove that it works, start small, pilot
Yeah.
it, experiment. Don't be afraid to try new things and then prove it back, right? And provide those key metrics. So to your point, Ellie, I think perfectly said.
Yeah, I think know who you're talking to is, I guess, essential in every aspect of business. And trying to win them over, you need to speak to their needs and the things they care about. And we know execs care about numbers, and we as marketers do as well, of course. But beyond numbers, Anna, we hear program managers and organizations talk about anecdotal success stories from employee advocacy, and this can be any number of things. But what's kind of the best example? I mean, have you seen any examples of this? But if so, what would be the best example that you've seen at an IQ?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I actually do have an anecdotal success, but it's not from NAQ, it's from GFK. So this company that we inherited our tool from, one of their ambassadors that was using the tool consistently and sharing content, was able to land a prospect meeting through the content that they were sharing. So they were able to reach the right audience, and they were able to land a prospective client meeting by sharing regular content. I think I don't remember if this potential client was part of their network or not, but they were able to get to that result, which ties back to revenue, right? So that was a success for them.
I love those kind of successes. Those are the easiest
Mhm.
ones to put on a training presentation, put in part of a conversation, just to be able to go, here's a person that won a meeting and won a deal off the back of this. And it, particularly for like a sales team, for a commercially interested team, it just
Mhm.
normalizes the whole thing. It's so easy to talk, Lewis,
Mhm.
from your world, marketing stats, and say, hey, we've increased a conversion rate in this part of the funnel off the back of this, and talk about big numbers. But if you can tell a salesperson A closed a deal because they posted more stuff onto LinkedIn than you, that causes all of the other salespeople to start sharing content. It makes a really, really big difference.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And I guess again, to tie it back to the report we were speaking about at the beginning, this is where those wins come from. Often you don't hear about them, but if you give people a chance to speak about them, if you're asking for regular feedback from your employee advocates, that's where you hear those success stories.
Mhm.
But Anna, I'm curious to know, as kind of a, well, maybe not the final point, but one of the final things I wanted to touch on. Um, if there's one thing that you would like companies to keep in mind when measuring ROI from employee advocacy,
Mhm.
what would that be?
Um, well, I'd say to keep up engagement, and not to make it about you, the company. It needs to be a win-win for your employees. So in order to see that ROI in terms of traffic, reach, impressions, engagement, you need to make sure that you are nurturing your program with regular updates, fresh content, inspiration, support. Make yourself available, to answer questions if people have them. Set up Q&A sessions, set up personal branding sessions, make it into an interactive program and not just a transactional thing where you're just spitting content out to people. You're actually supporting their personal branding goals. So that way you can keep seeing your great results. Because I think at the beginning, when you first launch an employee advocacy program, you see really great results because people get really excited about it. A lot of signups, huge adoption rate. And then, after maybe like a few months, you start seeing dropouts, right? People start getting less engaged, the excitement sort of passed. And so the harder part is actually keeping that momentum going. So really getting creative and finding ways to keep people engaged is going to help you to keep that ROI consistent. So that's what I would say, is to focus on that.
Such a big truth, that, isn't it? People sign up initially really excited, shiny new tool, shiny new project that's just been launched, and then that engagement starts to dip. That was something we saw and still sometimes see, and not as much
Hmm.
these days, but particularly 3 4 years ago when we were launching programs, you get that huge engagement spike and it dips back down. And the earlier you can catch the drop is really important. But actually, I tend to see wherever that starts to plateau out, that's your
Hmm.
baseline metric to work from, and you want to grow back up from there is a really important thing. But engagement, reminders, tips, help,
Hmm.
not treating employees like digital billboards is a phrase we use quite often, where
Oh, I love
give
that.
them that option to build that personal brand, not just we've released a new product, we've released a new feature. You don't want to just
Hmm.
provide that content.
Absolutely. No, for sure. And having a point of contact, whether that be a person or an inbox that you can provide for people to ask questions, is really important. We have an inbox for social media for all employees that they can contact for questions. We also have a senior leadership inbox that's just for people of a certain level who want to post. And to be honest, like, some people will write to us, some people won't. So it's there. So in case someone needs it, they know who to write to, and we make that available for people who maybe have some doubts on something. Like, hey, I want to post this. How do you feel about it? Like, is this okay? Is this compliant? Most questions are more on the compliance side. Like, is it okay if I say this? Is it okay if I post that? So making sure that you're available for people and not just, like I said, providing material and then disappearing is going to be really, really important.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, we often say internally, employee advocacy has to be a two-way street. You have to speak about the employee benefits when you're speaking with your employees, and again, internally, when you're trying to get this thing signed off, it has to be about the company benefits, which I think really ties all of this together quite nicely. We've spoken about the benefits of employee advocacy and how you've kind of launched this internally. But then I really appreciate you sharing your expertise and your personal story as well on personal branding or just building your personal brand. So Anna, I'm conscious that you're incredibly busy, and I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today. But as one final question, we ask every guest this, and that is, who do you think we should invite next, and who would you like to see on our show?
Oh my gosh. Definitely, there are a lot of people who do employee advocacy well and report on it publicly on LinkedIn. A woman that I really love, who I've met and I follow, we've shared the stage a few times at some conferences, is actually Eva Baluchova. She works for Danfoss, and I just love her content. She's a top voice on LinkedIn as well, and someone who shares like really valuable stuff. So I would have her as your next guest. She's going to be great. Hopefully, you get her on.
100%. Yeah, I follow her. I love her content. So yeah, I'll check in with her soon for sure. But again, Anna, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it. And for everybody listening, please do go follow Anna on LinkedIn and across social media. If you're interested in employee advocacy and hearing these success stories, that's the place to go. And again, just to reiterate the report that we mentioned, you can download a copy of that in the show notes. But thank you, everybody, for listening. Anna, thank you again.
Thank you so much.
We'll catch everybody in a few weeks' time.